Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, looking back, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 turned out to be one of the most significant pieces of legislation ever passed by the U.S. Congress. Fact. And then there was this. On the Senate floor, Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, the man who drove the bill, went out of his way to explain that the Democratic Party was absolutely not trying to replace the American population with more compliant foreign-born voters.
Okay, I'm listening. You have my attention now.
No way. That's an insane conspiracy theory, he explained. Quote, "This bill will not flood our cities with immigrants," Kennedy said. "It will not upset the ethnic mix of our society. It will not relax the standards of admission. It will not cause American workers to lose their jobs."
Oh, right.
It's all bitterly amusing when you look back at it because, of course, that is precisely what this bill did. This bill changed America completely and forever. And the numbers show it. In the years since that legislation passed, the United States' total population exploded by 140 million people. You're seeing that chart on your screen right now. What direction does it point? Well, steadily upward. That's the population. Now, where did all those people come from? There's nothing wrong with more people. The question is, who are they and where do they come from? Well, what you're seeing is not the kind of organic growth that you would see in a healthy society that's become more prosperous and welcoming of families. It's not like people were so confident in the future they decided to have more kids. No, it's just the opposite. Exactly the opposite of that. In fact, since Ted Kennedy's bill became law, birth rates among native-born Americans, which are the clearest possible measure of optimism in the future, those have dropped off a cliff, and you're seeing that chart on the screen now. It's the inverse of the first chart. This chart points downward.
What?
This country is now well under the so-called replacement level. That means if we continue on this trajectory, and no one's trying to take us off this trajectory, eventually there will be no more native-born Americans. So you put these two graphs together, and what do they show you? Well, they show you a number of things, but here's the main one. Sometime around 1965, our leaders stopped trying to make the United States a hospitable place for American citizens, their constituents, to have their own families. That used to be considered the central task of leadership, perpetuating the population. If people are happy and confident, they'll have kids. They're vested in the society, and if they're not, they won't. That was their job. So they stopped doing it, and instead they just imported new people. That's literally what happened. Now, you're not allowed to point this out, of course. The media become absolutely hysterical when you do because it's so obviously true. What's interesting is that if something like this happened in any other country, say in China or Japan or Nigeria, the populations of those countries would likely revolt because you can't do that. The leaders of a country can't change the population of the country, especially in a democracy, without the consent of the existing population. So if those populations in, say, Nigeria, for example, revolted, the New York Times would be deeply sympathetic to their outrage. Again, you can't just replace the electorate because you didn't like the last election outcome. Fact. That would be the definition of undermining democracy, changing the voters. But when it happens in this country, there is mandatory media-enforced silence. And in fact, if you notice it's happening, it's your fault. You're immoral. You're a racist. But it has nothing to do with race. It's about change, and it's absolutely real. The majority of population growth since 1965 has come from immigration, not from Americans having more kids.
That's crazy!
In 1965, the number of permanent illegal migrants in this country from Latin America was essentially zero. There were migrant farm workers, but there were no huge populations of people living here illegally. By 2008, that number had grown to perhaps 20 million people. They lied about it, but the best estimates suggest it was tens of millions. And then came Joe Biden. Joe Biden accelerated that sad trend beyond what anyone thought was possible. The foreign-born population is now growing by 132,000 people every month.
I said, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
That's more than triple the average high under previous administrations. It's double Barack Obama's highest totals. According to AEI scholar Mark Perry, we can expect over 9 million new illegal aliens by the end of Joe Biden's first term. Nothing like this has ever happened in this or maybe any other country ever. And it's happening for one reason. It's It's not natural, it's the product of a policy choice. Joe Biden promised amnesty to anyone who makes it across our border. So in 2019, for example, the Trump administration criminally prosecuted 110,000 illegal migrants for violating immigration law. Not that they were bad people, some of them were great people, but you're not allowed to go into someone else's country without permission. That's what a law is. And if you ignore the law, you are no longer a real country. You're something less than that. You're a failed state. So you have to enforce the law, including immigration law. But Joe Biden stopped doing it. Last year, Joe Biden prosecuted fewer than 3,000 total. That's according to DHS data obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. That's a drop of nearly 98%. So naturally, people are coming. Because why wouldn't you want to move to the United States? Knowing that when you get here, you will be treated like someone who deserves to be here and given every possible public benefit. You'd be crazy not to come. And so they are, in massive numbers. And then traveling, often at public expense, paid for by you without your knowledge, throughout the United States.
What the hell?
Watch one border agent explain what exactly is happening.
DPS officers have been assisting Border Patrol under Operation Lone Star for 16 months. In that time, they've apprehended 279,000 undocumented migrants, arrested 17,000 criminals, and seized nearly 320 million lethal doses of fentanyl.
Every state has become a border state because all these individuals that are coming across, aside from the families, the single adults, the gotaways, the drugs that are coming in are going to other states. They're not staying in Texas. So that's Mexico over there, so they'll come across, they'll bring them across on a raft. They usually have 30, 40, immigrants on these rafts. They're bringing them across. They know where to drop them off, and they know where to walk.
So here's another thing that's changed since 1965, along with our population. Politicians no longer feel they need to pretend, partly because the population is so different. You've got a lot more people with permanent jobs in American politics. So unlike Lyndon Johnson, Joe Biden didn't pretend that his goal was not to change the population. He said it out loud. During the campaign, Biden referred to illegal immigration as a gift. Watch.
Guess what? They're the reason why. The legal as well as undocumented are the reason why our society is functioning, the reason why our economy is growing. We don't talk about that. We stand up and act like it's a burden. It is not a burden. It's a gift.
Is he all right upstairs?
It's a gift, says a man who has worked in a public job his entire life, who's never had a real job ever, is lecturing you about the economy and how it works, as if he knows. By the way, in that tape, Joe Biden was so senile that his wife and his handlers gave him drugs before that interview that you just saw. So that's the guy telling you about the economic benefits of illegal immigration. Now, most of you are not supposed to notice that conversation even took place, just like you're not supposed to notice when the New York Times prints an op-ed called "We Can Replace Them," because that's a dangerous conspiracy theory. What are you, Alex Jones?